You are listening to part 2 of our 28-part series, The 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Thank you, Gemini. Was there anything in the material that we went over last week that startled you?
No, I've read quite a bit of your material and some of your books as well. I wasn't startled as much as I was just fascinated. I was just getting lost in it and processing it, and just wow factor more comes to mind.
Oh, thank you so much. That's wonderful. I was spending the weekend with Patch Adams and a group of about 30 people, and there was a lot of kind of venting about modern medicine. Mm-hmm. And I found it especially interesting because most of the people there were medical professionals. And they are, I would say, probably more dissatisfied with modern medicine than people who are on the receiving end. So just so we all know, nobody is happy with it. And this all was kind of the blame was laid on medicine. And I kept hearing this word medicine. Well, medicine just isn't the way it used to be. And if only we could do this to medicine. And finally, on the last day, when I was just shivering to say something, Patch and Susan said to us, "Is there anybody who wants to say something?" And I thought, that's me. I really want to say something. And Susan had a marker and a big pad of paper, and I went through the 7 medicines. I said, write this down. Number 1, serenity medicine. Number 2, story medicine. Number 3, belief medicine. Number 4, lifestyle medicine. Now draw a line and another line. Now, number 5, alternative medicine. Number 6, pharmaceutical medicine. And number 7, high-tech medicine. I said, there are 7 medicines. We've spent the weekend so far talking about medicine, but what medicine are we talking about? Most of you, in fact, have been talking about high-tech medicine and pharmaceutical medicine. And I want you to look here and recognize that there are 5 other medicines which are alive and well.
How was that received?
Well, the massage, the people who did massage didn't think massage should be in alternative medicine. And it was quite interesting. And Susan had a good comeback for them. She said, Susan's put herself as an herbalist in alternative medicine. She said, I think this is very fair. And I hoped that what would happen would be that this would sink into their minds, and they would realize that it's not medicine that's to blame, but our choice of which medicine and when. Mm-hmm. Last week I said that we do live in time, and we are bound by time. And so time is indeed a very important part of the 7 rivers of healing. And time is important because it's the motivator. I talked about last week having all this material from the Feminist Health Center. They wanted me to organize and put into a pamphlet, and how I wanted to organize it in a way where we could choose what to do while creating the least possible harm. And I started envisioning these 7 medicines and ordering them according to the principle of first, do no harm. And right away, I was met with some skepticism when it came to step 0, do nothing. And someone said to me, well, that's how people get into trouble, right? Like, we could say, well, Susan, last week you told this story about this man, this wild man, and he was walking everywhere, and he got this parasite, and it, ate his brain. And it ate his brain because he did nothing. So how can you even say do nothing? Already that's a problem right there. You're saying that do nothing is harmless, but look, do nothing can kill you. So I wanted to be clear that do nothing wasn't don't do anything. That do nothing was more on the order of the Zen of the doing of the nothingness. And that what really separated the doing of nothing from doing nothing was time. Doing nothing, although it is timeless, is within time and recognizes our cells, our organisms, as being bound to and limited by time. Do nothing implies that we have all the time in the world, which we don't. So how does this work out? Let's look at a couple of examples, and then we'll look at some specific ways of working with these 7 rivers as we move in to whatever it is we're going to do. So one of the things that happened to me fairly recently was that I fell. I fell really hard, and I really banged up my wrist and my hand and my arm. And they began to swell most alarmingly. Now, most of you in your minds, I'm going to guess, have already sent me to the 7th medicine. You've already sent me to high-tech medicine. You already want me to go for an X-ray. And it is here, at what I call the intersection of story medicine and modern high-tech medicine, that we find people falling off the edge of that cliff. Now, I'm certainly not saying that having an X-ray would have harmed me. Certainly it is radiation. Certainly we accumulate radiation throughout our lives, and radiation can cause cancerous changes in our cells. All those things are true, but that's not so much what I'm talking about. The movement to get that high-tech image, to get that story from the high-tech image, to satisfy our curiosity with the X-ray, puts us into a situation in which we are going to, it is assumed, be treated based on that high-tech image. What does that mean? What am I getting at here? Actually, the possibility of an X-ray was not a possibility. The nearest X-ray facility to me was 7 or 8 hours and a ferry ride away. So that wasn't going to happen. Clearly, there were no broken bones. I could wiggle my fingers. I had sensation. Nothing was poking through my skin. There was no blood, although there was an alarming amount of swelling and a disgusting amount of pain. didn't want to go for an X-ray. And even had there been one around the corner, I would have done my best to convince the people there with me not to take me there, because I would not at that moment have had the wherewithal, the energy, or the personal force to say no to what they would want to do to me after the X-ray. I probably would have said later, or maybe I probably could have gathered that much force or energy, but at that point, I really just wanted to take care of myself. So the decision that we have almost immediately in many cases of a problem, an injury, an illness, a disease is, am I going to start my healing by jumping into the Class 5 rapid of the Whitewater River with only an inner tube? And that's what I see many people doing. They don't actually understand that going for a high-tech diagnosis puts them in that river. And not just the direct and present danger, but danger in a different way. It is sad, but it is true, that to get a medical degree in the United States is very expensive and very time-consuming and rather disastrous for oneself. And so much so that it can be extremely difficult to set up practice for oneself after getting one's MD. And so many young MDs go into practice with others, move into an already established practice. And more times than I would like to hear, I hear from them that they are appalled, that they are told that certain tests must be ordered for all people, whether they need it or not, and a certain amount of drugs must be prescribed for all people, and they need it, obviously. And these are well-intentioned human beings who don't mean or want to create a medical practice in which people have many tests and which more harm can come from the tests, not just directly from the x-rays of the tests, but we know that mammograms increase the risk of women having surgery on their breast. So high-tech medicine leads to more high-tech medicine. So right away, we have to ask ourselves to remember, serenity medicine is where we start. Yes, even in an emergency, serenity medicine is where we start. We can move through the 7 medicines step by step, setting a time limit at each step. Remember how important time is, and that time is our motivator, and it makes the difference between doing nothing and doing nothing. So, we have discovered a lump in our breast. We're going to do nothing for 1 month. And during that month, we are going to not worry, because worrying is doing something. I'll talk more next week about serenity medicine, and more the week after that about doing nothing, because this is a very rich topic and a wonderful river of healing. Now, at the end of that month, which has been marked on a calendar, a decision point has been reached, and we must decide, am I going to continue with Serenity Medicine? And an indication for that would be the lump has not grown, the lump has not changed. I'm going to continue to engage in Serenity Medicine for another, and you will pick a time period and mark it on a calendar. Or at the end of that time period, or at any time before the end of that time period, we may say to ourselves, this lump is getting bigger. This lump is getting bigger, and it is concerning me. And I am not going to wait out my entire time period. I am going to move on to the next river now. So our time limit does not constrain us. We don't have to wait for it, but motivates us. It causes us to move to the next river of healing. In the step-by-step approach, as we move from Serenity Medicine to Story Medicine, we leave Serenity Medicine behind. Similarly, if we don't find what we want at Story Medicine and we move on to Faith Medicine, then we leave Story Medicine behind. This is rather like walking up a set of stairs made of wood. We've all walked up those kinds of stairs. You can see through them. Often decks have stairs like that, right? It's a stringer on the side and then the wooden planks across, and you step on it, but there's just space in between it so that when you step on one step, you're just on that board, and then when you step to the next step, you're just on that board. And so in this way, we move through the 6 steps of healing. We move along the 7 rivers. We partake of the 7 medicines, one at a time, setting time limits and moving from one to the next as we need. A woman giving birth is an ideal situation for moving from one step to the next step to the next step. We don't start with surgery. We start with serenity and get deeper and harder and stronger as we need until we have a successful birth. Now, wooden stairs are not the only kinds of stairs. There are also stairs made of concrete. And if you look at concrete stairs from the side, you can see that every step is underlaid by the steps under it. In other words, the whole thing is one massive thing, so that when we start with Serenity Medicine, if we do not achieve what we want with Serenity Medicine, we continue on with Serenity Medicine and we add Story Medicine. And if we don't come to what we want with Story Medicine, we continue on with Serenity Medicine, and we continue on with Story Medicine, and we add Faith Medicine. And so on, each time adding to what we are doing, not leaving anything behind, but adding on again with time frames, with dates written on our calendar, with a way of thinking about what is an appropriate time. And we will often need to ask books or friends or someone in the know what a reasonable time frame is. For a lump in your breast, a month is a reasonable time frame, unless it starts to grow, and then maybe a month isn't a reasonable time frame. But in the vast majority of cases, it is. However, the couple here in my hometown who continued to give a homeopathic remedy to their baby who was running a fever of 105 for 3 days did not understand The fever like that needs to be broken as quickly as possible. And if the homeopathic remedy didn't work within an hour, then the next stronger thing needed to be used. Up to and including antibiotics, but the baby did indeed wind up in the hospital and was convulsing when it was finally taken from the parents. Again, not because they were doing something wrong, but because the time limit that they hadn't set had led them to continue to do something that, while everything works, not everything works every time for everybody in every situation. The time limit helps us to recognize when something just isn't working. And we need to give up on it and not to choose another thing in the same realm, but to go on to the next river, to the heavier thing, to the harder thing, to the stronger thing. Not to walk in circles, but to look for the beacon that leads us to where we are going to get what it is that we need to get. So we have this step-by-step approach. This, it doesn't work, I leave it behind and go on to the next thing. We have the additive stairs approach, this, and add the next thing, and add the next thing, and add the next thing, so that if we wind up in surgery, we're doing serenity medicine and story medicine and belief medicine and lifestyle medicine and alternative medicine, even though we're going for surgery. And the outcomes then are quite remarkable. The third way to use the 7 rivers of healing, the 7 medicines, is to use them globally. This often happens when there is a trauma, such as I suffered to my wrist and hand, or when there is an alarming diagnosis. A friend of mine called and told me that she was scheduled for surgery in 4 days, and it was going to be rather major surgery. She outlined to me what she was doing. Her serenity medicine was that she was going to be sleeping an extra 2 hours each night before the surgery to give her immune system time to really get built up and to get strong. And of course, sleeping is a good way to not worry. She was committing herself, in fact, to not worrying because she knew that that does indeed draw down her immune system. The story of what was going on was that she had a fibroid, and the fibroid had gotten quite large, and the doctor wanted to do immediate surgery and to remove her entire uterus along with the fibroid, and to do this by making 2 very large incisions, one horizontal and one vertical, on her abdomen because she was a woman of some size. She had another possible alternative story, which was that her uterus could be removed vaginally along with the fibroid without having to cut her up, to literally draw and quarter her. And so she went toward her surgery date with these rather conflicting stories. For her belief medicine, she asked me, along with other friends, each one of us, to guard one of her chakras. This was a woman who did a lot of psychic work, a lot of psychic healing, and she felt very strongly that if indeed they put her deeply under and cut her into 4 pieces, that she would not be willing to come back, and she wanted us to guard her chakras and see to it that she could not get out. As for lifestyle medicine, she told me about the special things that she was eating, the nourishing herbal infusions that she was drinking, and for alternative medicine, the herbs that she was gathering to have with her to help in her post-operative conditioning. She was, in fact, doing all of these things simultaneously. One of the more interesting things that she did, and I highly recommend it, is that she recognized that while the surgeon who was going to be operating on you should be certainly skilled. The person who holds your life in their hands is the anesthesiologist. And she actually went and interviewed anesthesiologists at the hospital where she was going to have the surgery until she found one that she was simpatico with and that they could work together. This proved to be very important because, as she told the anesthesiologist, she has idiosyncratic reactions to things, and she can sometimes be put very deeply under by drugs that wouldn't necessarily put other people under, or she can find herself resisting and not able to actually benefit from the pain-relieving or narcotic drugs that she's being given. And she was very glad that she had spent that time to actually find the person who could work with her, because indeed they were able to give her a mix of anesthesia which allowed her to somehow communicate with her doctor that there was a way to do the surgery vaginally, and the doctor was able to hear that and to do that. And so, interestingly enough, in that was a time when this woman's story actually won out. And as she later said to me, it was because she was a woman who was well prepared. And this is one of the things that Maria Sabina used to say is, I am a woman who's well prepared. I am a well prepared woman. Because of her well preparedness, because of her understanding of the 7 medicines and using the 7 medicines globally, she was able to have her preferred outcome. To me, one of the most interesting things about this was that I had chosen a votive candle to burn for her. She had asked each one of us, as we were guarding her chakras, to light a candle and to focus our thoughts and our energies on this. Remember, this is belief medicine. And I lit this votive candle in a very beautiful holder. And we all know how long it takes a votive candle to burn, and it's not that long, a couple of hours at the most. And yet this candle burned on and on and on, and it must have burned for close to 5 hours. It really made me appreciate how important it was to her that her friends were there, standing with her, guarding her, keeping her energy safe. I experienced a bit of the global approach when we hauled me back home after the accident. First of all, we rushed through the gathering darkness of the Costa Rican night over a typically bumpy Costa Rican road, some of it unpaved. And when we got back to my daughter's house where we were all staying, it was wonderful to see people springing into action and bringing forth their remedies, and how happy I was to be able to globally accept those remedies. One woman spreading arnica gel along the length of my arm, and what a wonderful, wonderful remedy arnica gel is. I believe in it. Another woman from Slovakia who's dipping towels in vinegar and then applying those to my arm. How wonderful to partake of the old world and to have that sting of the vinegar in my nostrils, and to accept her story, that this was part of her lifestyle and something that had been done for a great many times. The 7 medicines gives us a way to understand all the information that is being thrown at us, so that we too, like Susan the writer, can turn a great mass voices into a coherent path for us that leads us home, that leads us to the place where we want to be. Well, Jim and I have hardly let you get a word in at all here tonight.
That's quite all right. I've been quite captivated.
And so this, I think, pretty much concludes our overview of the 7 medicines. And next week, we will begin to delve into the richness of the first medicine. We'll continue on for another 26 weeks talking about the 7 medicines. I certainly hope that this very good idea of mine can help you to get the health care that works best for you, as well as remembering that herbal medicine is people's medicine.
Thank you, Susan. This concludes part 2 of our 28-part series, The 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.